This is Friday Jobber on the 18th day of October 2013. The great government shutdown of 2013 is now over, and the debt ceiling was raised. All of this is temporary, however, machinations will continue. We'll hear from President Obama as he brings together these events and how they will proceed there. We'll just have a few preliminary words at this point in time, and then we'll go to the all-important sporting scores of the day. But nonetheless, what is basically happening now is the Republicans have received a great tactical setback and a strategic defeat in their campaign to defund Obamacare. It did not happen, and they've tried numerous times before. And normally, under most circumstances, we'll apply O.T. Leo's rule, the free strikes rule, the Minnesota farm boy. Nonetheless, he used to produce this program. He's very good at doing it. What has happened here, the Republicans had failed once, and this was prior to the 2012 election when the President Obama was victorious over one Willard Romney. Now, their whole stratagem from the 2008 election was ossification. In other words, to block everything that President Obama was attempting to do. They failed on the Affordable Care Act. It was passed with a solid Democratic vote alone. The Republicans stood by and watched it. They thus threw up hearings in every roadblock they could possibly think of out there. And in the 2010 election, they had some success in that it was an off-year election as far as presidential politics were concerned, and many of President Obama's core supporters simply did not turn out there. And in the Commonwealth, of course, we had our own Martha Coatley running for the Senate. Wrong Way Brown upset her. There were many things going on. The National Party did not put the resources in there. It was not totally Martha's fault. She had management that was not the best. That you could say was her fault. And of course, it was the fault of the management. The management did not understand how to run a campaign in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's that simple. Thus, Martha went down in defeat. Wrong Way Brown took a victory lap on his way to the Senate. He ran around the course like Fenway Park a number of times. And Wrong Way then ran for re-election against Senator Warren. He was defeated. It was a very expensive campaign. They brought everything, including her Aboriginal or Native heritage, into the campaign. They forgot to tell the people that the chief of the Cherokee Nation had the same quote-unquote degree of Cherokeeness as Senator Warren did. Thus, that did not work. And he also lost some states that would have been winnable. Indiana, no doubt. They had a Tea Party nut there. And even in Missouri, one of these states that is ultra-red, not as red perhaps as Kansas or Louisiana or Mississippi or Oklahoma in that area, but nonetheless had been red. Claire McCaskill was able to slide to victory, and thus she's back in the Senate for another 6 years. This was where the Republicans' grand plan did not work. And they went to 2012 very competent, number of candidates out there on the far right, no Sarah Palin this time around. But they did have Newt Gingrich, and they had various others, Centurion out of Pittsburgh, and various other right-wing standard barriers. The one that probably had the most potential was the man out of Atlanta, the Morehouse man. The man had been at the Kansas City Fed, Herman Cain. But Herman Cain bit the dust as almost by a mutual pact. News out of Chicago, womanizing. And we know where that was going. No doubt it came from Chicago, but with the approval of the Republican Party. And the man more than likely behind that was one Willard Romney and his cronies. But it didn't really matter. Willard got the nomination somewhat shaky. He was set back by his comment on the 99%. where he said basically 47% of the people would not vote for him, or would vote, for president, would vote for him, but there was a small core of about 45%, and that was very close to what Willard Romney got. Of people that were pensioners, that were students, that were people that were on Obamacare and various governmental programs. But he made a cardinal error there. He included disabled veterans programs, very, very popular in that mash, and also Social Security types. Many of those people are literally in the Tea Party. So he couldn't make it happen. He couldn't make it happen in Ohio. Thus, he couldn't make it happen in Pennsylvania. It was a command and control state. So he was kind of out of gas. In Florida, the Democrats there ran behind Trayvon Martin. And all the older people he could get, ex-CIA, ex-military types, ex-Sunbirds from Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin, that winter in Florida. They went there early so they could vote. Didn't help him. He lost Florida. He did pick up Texas, but however, he had virtually nothing left. Wisconsin, he couldn't get it done in Wisconsin, so there was nothing left. Willard just ran up the white flag. The rich gathered at Logan Airport. Their jets and all were coming in. They were going to have the coronation of King Willard. Well, there was no coronation. All they could do was literally drink their drinks and head home. That was it. That was it for them. But yet the Republican Party was not done yet. They got the grand stratagem there with the idea of dealing with the budget, and their tactic would be on the two to shut down the government. Well, they did. They shut the government down for almost 3 weeks. President Obama, of course, will that. Millions and millions of dollars were lost. Probably something like 5/10 of GMP were also lost in this. But the holiday season wasn't lost. Fortunately, an agreement came. But then the debt ceiling there, that was the, as they say, the old marker in the sand. The business community just simply said, you will raise the debt ceiling. The Chinese, who hold roughly $1.5 trillion in bonds, said if you don't get your house in order, we are bailing. So they were left with a situation. Many of the Republicans, and you can just look at the House vote and tell where that went, were forced to vote to deal with the twin problems, that is, the shutdown and debt ceiling. Now that is behind us. According to Boehner, they have other stratagems. They were going to deal with this help device scheme of theirs, but that scheme in itself is very, very tenuous to try to divide the Democrats up. But what Boehner doesn't understand there, depending on how much the president wants the device tax, he's got the veto pen, and Boehner could not overcome that. So again, he's shut out. So various other schemes that they could try, well, they could shut the government down again next year in election year. But President Obama and the Chamber of Commerce are daring them. As far as on the debt ceiling, they are double daring them. And their other stratagem was to have some hearings. They called the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Sibilis. She just blew them off. She didn't show up. So this time around, it's going to be a different situation. A rejuvenated President Obama, a President Obama that's not running for re-election, that is out there and will deal with these people, and so will the Democratic Party. They hold 3 of the 4 aces. They have to understand this. And the Democrats have to understand their day of capitulation and selling out as they did on single payer and letting that marginal character Lieberman block that. And Baucus is retiring. He won't be around. He was a guy writing the health care. Those people are history. This is a new day here. And the Republicans still have the same old stratagem. It's not going to work. Their only option is 1, 2. Shut the government down again. Threaten the debt ceiling, they'll lose again. And in 2014, it'll be a bloodbath. We can guarantee that. Take it to the House. As they say, and anyone's been to a goat roping contest knows that. The president also nominated a new head of Homeland Security. He's an African American. He's a lawyer from New York, a graduate of Columbia University and Morehouse College. His name is pronounced Jay Johnson. So he will, if confirmed, be the first African-American Director of Homeland Security. The department that G.W. Bush created has a very large department at this point in time. We don't know the exact numbers there, but they were still in the business because they incorporate such things as Secret Service, the Immigration Service, etc. So in other words, they put multi-departments together. The idea there was to attempt to control things. We'll go now to, let's do the scores real quickly here. We're getting kind of carried away here with our speech of fine. Nonetheless, the Red Sox were victorious tonight in Detroit, of all places. Let's get this straight here. 4-3. Look at the line score here. The Sox had 4 runs. The Tigers 3 on 10 hits each, and the Tigers had an error. So that was basically the score there. Mike Napoli drive cleared the wall in center field, and it landed in the ivory. In one of the, of course, key hit home runs, Cabrera remained stymied by a tough Boston bullpen. So pitching evidently was able to move tonight and when return to Fenway Park with a 3-game lead. And if they can win in Fenway, they go on to the World Series. Now that'll be on a Saturday night. That will be Mike Schussler versus the Red Sox Clay Bachos in the 6th game. Now will it go to Game 7? Very difficult to say on that. And also we'll have the series out between Los Angeles and St. Louis. Another very important series going on there, and let's look at the way that will be going. Friday night in Los Angeles, of course, will be at St. Louis. Kershaw versus Washer there, and then on Saturday we'll have, if Detroit survives, they'll be, of course, at Boston at the early game, 4 o'clock, and then the Dodgers at St. Louis. So those will be moving on, and they have a scheduled Sunday game, but we don't know if that will be working. The LA game, Rye versus Wainwright. Wainwright, of course, is if I recall correctly, the knuckleballer. So we'll see how that goes on. Now we'll go to the University of Virginia. There'll be a short run here. Larry Sabator has written a book on the assassination of President Kennedy, the 50th anniversary. We call it the half century. He had a news conference about it, and I'll just read a bit from their particular thing here. It says, hundreds of books and studies have been written about the Kennedy assassination. Alert readers have noted that their authors often use the word alleged, claim, and supposedly. Just as I have done in this book, this is Larry Sabato speaking here, the debate over the Kennedy assassination is one of the longest-running sagas in American history, involving hundreds of subplots. Facts, quasi-facts, have dribbled all over the decade. Quite a few of these facts are unverifiable or partially verifiable, which does not necessarily mean they're incorrect. Stories are told by the respectable and the dubious. Witnesses alike that were based on murky memories of long events. And this is one of the things to remember. This is an event 50 years ago. Some legitimate evidence is contradictory. A case of characters in historical enterprise, many of them colorful and quirky, could fill a bookshelf of Shakespearean plays. The search for truth, and be very careful when anybody talks about truth, because it's not attainable. The facts are not necessarily truth. That's a value-added judgment. The Kennedy assassination is the quest for El Dorado, the mythical city of gold that tantalized European explorers in the 16th century. Inspired by vague clues and American legends, these explorers spent years in the wilderness hoping to strike it rich, but often died of disease and starvation and so that. So like the Republicans. This book is a synthesis of what we know after 50 years, not a misguided attempt to solve the insolvable. Too many cases are called the murder of the century, but other than the killing of Archduke Ferdinand, which sparked the death of Medes in the so-called Great War, that was World War I, to many of the Americans, the slaying of John F. Kennedy may well qualify for the 20th century slot. Few would question that it is one of the most tangled, torturous, and intimidating political executions of all times. Well, not so sure about that. It was in the modern age of TV. We had Lincoln and we had various other assassinations all over the world. In these pages, I've tried to do justice to the accumulation of evidence. I've attempted to weigh it fairly in evaluating the major theories about 22nd November that have been proposed. This has been a difficult undertaking for two reasons. First, Americans do not get all the facts at the same time. When the assassination might have been solved to most people's satisfaction. Many powerful forces were determined to keep the public from learning the full story. They handicapped the initial investigators, lest it uncovered the entire embarrassing truth. Everyone can now see the obstructing of the government's effort to kill Fidel Castro and other foreign dictators, they call them, and we call them leaders, was part of the motivation, but there's more. Whether these powerful figures, and this V, they didn't mention them. They're talking about Lyndon Johnson here. Obvious signals about Oswald's potential as an assassin are trying to obscure their outright culpability in a more direct sense will be argued for years to come. Second, a comparative appraisal of 22nd November is impossible because many government documents are still classified. We asked why he wrote the book. Incidentally, on this same network, Blog Talk, the national uncle himself, Uncle Tavis Smiley, will have Vincent Bugliosi around. He also wrote a book on this. Everyone, his mother's written a book on this. Maybe I'm the only one who hasn't. The public has been trusted with an entire record about the murder of the 35th president when the 44th is sitting in the White House. Many of these documents finally are scheduled to be released in 2017. Americans may or may not learn anything new at that time. One doubts that intentionally incriminating paperwork will be found intact at this late date. No doubt about it. It's probably been burned years ago. A half a century there. Advances in technology have evidently permitted researchers to do more with the physical evidence and remains, such as the Zaputa film and existing still photographs of critical moments. One virtual piece of evidence, the police dicta belt, and this is basically what his book is based upon. It was thought to be to preserve the sounds of the shot in Dealey Plaza, was my choice for advanced analysis. For a long time, the evidence appeared to suggest that by accident, via a stuck mic on a policeman's motorcycle, a motor scooter, in the motorcade, the sounds of the assassination were recorded back at the police headquarters in Dallas on a dicta belt. A recording device of that era that was primitive but fairly reliable. The dicta belt was preserved by the Dallas police because it recorded various instructions given by its officers during the motorcade in 1976. A radio program director, Gary Mack, who was interested in the Kennedy assassination, had recently moved to Dallas, learned of the dicta belt's existence. An audio specialist, Mack, asked questions no one had thought to pose earlier. In addition to routine commands, could this dicta belt also recorded the sounds fired at JFK? If so, could the dicta belt be of a long sought Rosetta Stone that at least revealed how many bullets had been fired and from which direction? During its investigation in the 90s, the select committee was informed of dicta belt's existence and potential. James Bargler, a well-known acoustic expert with a Harvard doctorate, doesn't really matter, in applied physics, was hired to analyze the dicta belt, organized and executed an elaborate plan to have the police sharpshooters target sandbags for every few yards on Elm Street and Dealey Plaza. The street was closed on a Saturday in August of 1998. And from various locations, such as the depository's 6th floor, as well as a grassy knoll fence, burglar knew the motorcade speed. Thus, he had some idea of the placement of the motorcycle in the motorcade. Now, the sound pattern of the dicta belt seemed to match up as well with some of the simulated shots. He concluded there were a 98.5% probability of gunfire on the dicta belt. Further, he saw that 4 gunshots, the echo pattern that matched the dicta belt sound, 3 of them coming from the book depository, 1 from the grassy knoll. When burglar first interpreted what the dicta belt showed, it horrified me. He said he instantly realized its implications. We will air at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. We just need to attempt to finish up a little bit more of this, and we'll get through. This is a presentation, incidentally, from the Crystal Ball. That's Larry Sabato's domain, as one would say. Let's continue on here. He was, this is Bargler. He was cautious in his statistical interpretation of sound patterns, and he would say only that there's a 50% probability that all 4 shots were real and not artificial of a 15-year-old dicta belt. The House Committee engaged 2 academics, Mark Weisler and Ernest Arskinsey of the University of New York. Further redefined his research, concluding that the probability of 4 shots with 1 from the grassy knoll was a 95% probability of best. The committee was stunned. It had been prepared to endorse the basic findings of one commission that Lee Oswald was the lone assassin, but reversed course and declared that the murder was a result of an undefined conspiracy. Naturally, no conclusion of this spectacular this spectacularly revisionist was going to stand unchallenged during the House hearings. The motorcyclist H.B. McLean, the cop who was identified as having the stuck mic, insisted he was not where Bargler analysis said he should have been. As a former chief counsel and staff director, Robert Berkey admitted it could be proven that no motorcycle was in the predicted location of the shots. Then serious doubt would be raised about the reliability of the acoustic project. While one analyst later concluded that McLean was correct, it was not possible to record the gunfire in the precise location. Others had disagreed, and this is one of those unsolved things. Various researchers have claimed the old dicta belt had odd voiceover out sync, and with the timing needed for the assassination sequence, the dicta belt had deteriorated to the point that it was not as reliable. The dicta belt used for Berger's analysis was not the original, but a duplicate that had been tampered with. Well, in 1982, National Academy of Science commissioned a panel of experts to review the work of the committee headed by Professor Norman Ramsey of Harvard. The committee concluded that the committee's work was seriously flawed and wrote that there was no acoustic bias for a claim of a grassy knoll shooter. Yet, in direct contradiction to the NSA report, the House Committee's work had been endorsed by a recent panel review study in Science and Justice. Blakey has summarized the newest study this way. This is an honest, careful scientific examination of everything we did with all the appropriate statistical checks. It shows that we made mistakes too, but minor mistakes. The degree of confidence that the shot from the grassy knoll was real, increasing from 95 to 93.3, either way is beyond a reasonable doubt. This is no area academic dispute. It goes on here. To have been fired just by Oswald with a bolt action rifle in the shooting sequence on the Zapruder film. The House panel was wrong when it claimed the dictaphone of the long-sought proof of the conspiracy evidence was the key to more than one marksman. However, new technological advances in audio research conducted for this book on all the Dallas police recordings. Thus, the conclusion of the assassination committee is wrong. Now, this is their conclusion here. On research, the demonstration that the police officer with the open mic was traveling at a high rate of speed at the time the slow-moving presidential motorcade proceeded through the streets of downtown Dallas. The officer was well past Dealey Plaza and in the vicinity of the trademark, over 2 miles from Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. Moreover, following the shooting, the president's limousine carried the dying president approached, then rushed by this officer in the motorcade on his way to Parkland. I can recall seeing 2 motorcycles. The motorcycle was parked and idle. The sound of the president's entourage gunning towards Parkland were unmistakable. They passed the stationary motorcycle within sight of the officer. There was no other siren-equipped emergency vehicle of any type operating in Dallas at this critical time. In addition, we believe that we have been able to identify the officer with the stuck mic. He is Willie Price, who joined the Dallas Police Department 17 years earlier. Excuse me. And was much liked and respected within the force. Early on the 22nd, Price had been assigned to monitor the corner of McKinney and Harwood Street, about 3/4 of a mile from downtown Dallas. After Kennedy passed there without incidents, his instructions were to go to the trademark, which he did. Our analysis strongly suggests that his motorcycle engine that is heard on the dicta belt running at a high speed once at the trademark. Price was located in the parking lot and awaited the president's arrival. Why is this officer with the stuck mic very likely to be Price? Every piece of evidence points in that direction. Our audio analysis demonstrates the officer with the stuck mic is well ahead of the motorcade at the time of the assassination. Price is indisputably positioned. The sounds of the limousine carrying Kennedy screened by Price stationary posts at the trademark are heard precisely when they should be, a few minutes past 12:30, and the mic became stuck just at the time Price talked to police headquarters once at Parkland. More important, the very morning Price had been given a substitute motorcycle to use on the 22nd that had demonstrated prior problems with a stuck mic. Finally, Price himself was convinced that his cycle was the source of difficulty and was the police dispatcher on duty, Jim Bowles. This is not a long-delayed revelation. Police drew this conclusion within hours of assassination. He indicated as much to other officers at Parkland, also to Bowles, who agreed with the assessment. As just indicated, instead of turning into the trademark, the president's limousine accompanying police vehicles whizzed by Price's vantage point. Price and all officers were ordered to leave the trademark and go to Parkland. As it happened, the Price intercepted and accompanied the car carrying Lyndon Johnson on a route to the hospital. LBJ's car lagged behind the president's limousine. Price was also among the officers at Parkland, who assisted in moving Kennedy's body into the trauma room 1. They guarded the room from the outside to prevent unauthorized entrance. He was already dead, incidentally. This was President Kennedy. Now we know the location of the stuck mic, and everything is obvious, given the distance of the open mic and Dealey Plaza. Now, this is the whole argument of his book. H.B. McLean of the in Dealey Plaza has been the motorcycle officer with the stuck mic. Is insisted the Dicta Belt would have answered the basic question. Therefore, the long hope for the Rosetta Stone, the Kennedy assassination, is nothing of sorts. So says Sabato. Now, this is interesting within itself as to where Sabato was and to where Sabato was not. Let's get to some polling here, and we need to mention this. This is released on October 15th. This was by him. On the whole, would you say that you are satisfied or dissatisfied with the future facing you and your family? 35% were satisfied. This is of all adults. And 44% dissatisfied, 21% not sure. Under 50, 36% satisfied, 41% dissatisfied, 23% unsure. Over 55, those would be the ones, remember the Kennedy deal. 32% satisfied, 49% dissatisfied, 19% very large. Now we get to some of the meat here. Suppose you could go back, any president, living or dead, and to the next president of the United States. Which would you want to be the next president? This is of all adults. 24% said Ronald Reagan. 21% Bill Clinton. 13% John F. Kennedy. 9% Lincoln. 6% Roosevelt. And only 5%, according to this, President Obama. And those under 55, 22% Reagan, 22% Clinton, 11% John F. Kennedy, Lincoln 12%, 6% Roosevelt, 6% President Obama, and those over 55, 28% Reagan. This is a conservative lot here. 20% Bill Clinton, 16% JFK, and lastly 4% there. We're moving down this survey. And as far as events, of all adults, 85% say 11 September. 36% the assassination of President Kennedy. 24% the Oklahoma City bombing. The attack on Pearl Harbor, 20%. The assassination of Dr. King, 20%. And the explosion of the Challenger space shuttle, 15%. Now, the event or experience, defining event for a particular generation of Americans. And under 54 and under, 93% said September 11, 19% said President Kennedy. Surprisingly, 35% said the Oklahoma City bombing, 14% Pearl Harbor, 19% Dr. King's assassination, and 20% the Challenger explosion. Now, for those over 55 and over, 92% September 11th, 64%, very surprising here, the highest percentage, President Kennedy, because they were older. 6% the Oklahoma City bombing, the Pearl Harbor, 30%, 21% Dr. King, and only 7% the Challenger. So that's sort of where they fell in. This was by Hart and Associates, incidentally, and asked only respondents who selected the Kennedy assassination in question 2. Remember if it happened and where they were. 11% of all adults, 10% said it was a shocking, tragic event. The first martyr of the president's assassination, raised that. 10% there. He died too young, too soon, 9%. People felt vulnerable, unsafe, worried, 7%, a great presently, 7% there. And it varies a little bit for age. We won't go into this. We'll be covering this for some time. And we went through the table has been ranked by the percentage of all adults who say clear and viant memory. And let's see, 95% September 11. We'll just get all adults here. 84%, that's 54 and older, of President Kennedy. The challenge is 63%, and the assassination of Dr. King, that's 49. You've got to be over 49. 34% of those. So we're kind of moving through this heart survey here, and of presidents on a scale, I believe, let's see, 1 to 10. President Kennedy. The ranks there, with 34% of those, 9 to 10. Reagan, 36%. And Dwight Eisenhower, 15%. Bill Clinton, 33%. Gerald Ford, 3%. You see where this is going. We'll kind of skip on past this question. And we'll go to the very bottom. Somewhere here, it's roughly 2,000 people were in this online survey, and it doesn't say down here. It does give the education thing here. Last grade completed of all adults, high school and junior high. Grade school, high school free. 29 were high school graduates, 19 some college. 10% of them had vocational training, 21% had BAs, BSs, whatever. The graduate types were 3% and postgraduates 11%. Those were all adults. Under 54%, it kind of went up a little bit. 29% again, high school graduates. And over 30% graduated from high school. Very interesting score right there. And 19% completed college. And of those, 23%. So this is a little bit of the heart survey out there. 81% of the people were white of all, and 11% African American, 1% Asian, and others. You can see they have Latinos in this one. And if they were under 54 and under, 77% were white. And the 55 and older, 86% were white. And 10% African Americans, 54 and under, 12% went up a little bit there as to who these people were. The Latinos, 12% there, and 15% under 54 and over, just 8%. You can see where the Latinos were in the survey. I don't know, we'll have time here to do the conservatives. Basically, 14% made 20,000 or less, 20,000 to 34,000, 14%. It's all of adults. And 18%, 50,000 to 74,000. And 10% of them, 100 to 124,000. You can see they were fairly well off. I think we'll get to the very conservative. 14%, somewhat conservative, 21%. You can see where this goes. In the middle of the road, 39%. But the conservatives, middle of the road, very conservatives were the majority of this survey. 17% were somewhat liberal. 9% were very liberal. So in other words, very few liberals in the whole thing, just 26%. The urban people, 23% of all adults were urban. 49% suburban, 13% small town, 15% rural, 24% under 54 were urban, 48% were suburban, 13% small town, and 15% rural. And of those 55 and older, 21% were in the city. Surprising 50% were suburban, 14 and 15% small town rural. You can see basically this was a survey of people from suburbia and rural. So we have to leave it at that, but this was a hard survey and this was how it was slanted. Nonetheless, this is Boston Red on the 18th day of October 2012. Have a happy weekend. We'll be back on the week that was, and the Monday Morning Quarterback and Numbers Man. Good day.